Hi, and welcome to another edition of our People First interview series, where we shine a light on great companies that not only do interesting and cool work, but most importantly, look after their people. Identifi Global is a market leader in personalized career management and talent acquisition recruitment consultancy with great candidate experience guaranteed. Check out identifiglobal.com for more information of the roles that we cover and our latest jobs. This week, I have the honor of welcoming Edward Bird, Managing Director of Solomonic. Edward has an extensive career spanning large corporates, including Reed Elsevier, through to startup tech businesses. He grew up in South Africa and started his career as a human rights activist before coming to the UK over 20 years ago. Solomonic is a litigation intelligence and analytics startup dedicated to building a data-led approach to litigation intelligence and decision-making. Built in collaboration with litigation lawyers and funders, it helps users stay on top of litigation activity, place their advice in statistical context, pick out arguments which have succeeded in the past, and carry out research on lawyers and expert witnesses. Hi, Ed. Thanks for coming on. How are you?
I'm very good. Thank you. How are you?
Not bad. Hopefully I've done you a good service there in terms of describing
fantastic. Thank you
what you guys
much.
do. But whereabouts are you in the world? You in UK at the minute. Whereabouts are you?
Right at the top end of London. So if you looked at London on the clock, I'm sort of at about just after 12 o'clock.
Oh, okay, fair enough. And so tell us a bit more about yourself. I've said a bit about the company, but tell us, who you are, what you do when you're not running a successful legal tech startup.
Oh, so that's a good question. I mean, running a startup is a kind of a 24/7 job. What I do when I'm not doing that, I run. I enjoy running, various kinds of running. I'm lucky enough to live near some nice country parks, so I can get out into the countryside. I am fascinated. I grew up in South Africa, and I came of age, I guess, at a moment just when the entire country changed. I was an anti-apartheid activist, and it was a very intense period and experience. And when you combine that with being young at the time, it leaves a very strong impression on you. I'm fascinated by similar people going through similar kinds of experience in different contexts. So I read a lot of history, and I'm particularly interested in people and how they experience major change. So think about people, young men going off to war in the First or Second World War and their experience and what it was like. The women who actually went into factories, the intensity of experience of that, I found really interesting. So when I'm not, building a business, I spend a lot of time doing that. Plus, parenting my very naughty teenagers.
Legal rights activists. What is that? How do you get into that?
Well, so I don't actually have a formal legal background, but human rights. Growing up as and opposing apartheid in South Africa, human rights were foundational to my value system, to what I believed in, and what we were fighting to achieve in the country. I played a very, very tiny role in that, but it was close to what was incredibly important to me.
Yeah.
And then came to the UK, I think really just to explore the world, and started working, ended up in large corporates, very, very different environment to the human rights sector. Spent a lot of time at LexisNexis, who have, market leader in legal knowledge provision in the UK. And then over a couple of other things, moved into Solomonic, which is fundamentally trying to innovate, not so much around the technology. I mean, there are lots of people doing very cool things with machine learning and various tools. We do use some of those tools, and we use them quite effectively, I think. But fundamentally, the innovation is around bringing a different mindset to how you make some of the decisions you make in litigation. And that, if you think about it, litigation probably hasn't really changed that much in 200 years. You're still basing decisions on one of our partners who's a fan of ours described it as gut instinct, and that maybe not being enough anymore. So how you leverage data to bear. good analogy, a very simple analogy, is what happens in financial markets. The more financial data you get, the more you expect a financial analyst or investment manager to not just have an instinct for what to invest in, but to have really strong data and analytics to support and guide them. And that's our vision here.
Yeah, absolutely. So talk us through a little bit then, coming from that big corporate world, if you like, you've worked for some interesting organizations. How's that transitioned into a startup? How's that been for you? And perhaps some of your biggest learnings from that.
So I think it is interesting because I think in the startup world, you almost have sort of two very discrete kinds of individuals. So you have those who've never really been in anything else. So they're obviously younger. They've come through some kind of training or university or whatever the case may be, and they go into the world of startups. And it's the world of startups is almost by because you need to move quickly, you need to experiment, you need to be a lot more agile. You tend to find you run much flatter structures, and you have a lot more sort of democracy and decision making and knowledge sharing. That's very different if you've been in corporate most of your days, as I was in most of my working life in big corporate. It's more structured. In my corporate experience, we spent a lot of time on trying to flatten that structure, on trying to engage. You spend you invest a lot of time in engaging your people, keeping them motivated, focused on the right objectives, on evaluating their performance and so on. You get into a startup and the squeeze on your capacity is just so much greater. You're just that much more focused on the success of the business, and frankly also on your customers. You're just very deeply focused on your customers and your users. So that's been honestly most of the time I find that exhilarating. It's really exciting to be able to move quickly, to have an idea for what will to have an idea for what will work, to sit in front of a customer or a prospect or a user and hear them say something and be able to go and action that really quickly, and then to see how they respond to that and to hear the delight in their voices or to get the response to their excitement. That's there's an intensity to that which you don't really find in a big corporate, or it comes along less often maybe.
Yeah, I would agree. I think some of the biggest things that happen within a startup is that you get access to everything, don't you? You get involved in everything, and you learn lots of skills. And someone much wiser than me said that the most engaged employees are the ones that've got 20% more work than they should have, because they're busy and they're doing stuff, as long as it's obviously good work. But I think that's true of a startup, is that everyone has their finger on the pulse, for want of a better phrase. But yeah, they're involved in everything. It's more responsive. The smallest thing, impacts a wider range of people. When in a large organizations, there's much more linear roles. Everyone's doing more focused tasks, but and obviously on a bigger scale. But they're not necessarily as close to the customer, which is really important. And something that we're seeing more and more across all sectors is that customers want their suppliers to be more agile, to be more responsive, to have more of a relationship. So, it's interesting to see what this, whether there will be, lots of these big companies in the future. So, I mean, on that point then, so, I mean, what have been your biggest people challenges, from, in a startup environment?
So, I think when I came into it, I mean, I did spend some time in startups earlier in my career. And actually, when you're running a human rights NGO, some of the things are similar because you have similar constraints in some ways. I'd say at the very beginning, the challenge is you need people, as you yourself said, you need all rounders. And if I torture somewhat a cricketing analogy, you need all rounders as opposed to specialist batsmen or bowlers or wicket keepers. You need individuals who can do more than one thing typically, not exclusively. You still need your subject matter specialists, but you need all-round capabilities. But those all-rounders are going to, not just be all-rounders. They're going to open the batting and they're going to open the bowling. So you're putting everyone into high-value roles within your business very, very quickly. Again, if you hop back to the corporate, I remember that classic sort of corporate, you hire a new employee and you give them time to bed in before you expect them to start to contribute. In a startup, you need to contribute by day 2. So there just is no capacity to allow somebody to sort of slowly grow into a role. You land in situ, you have to be up and running very, very quickly. So the earliest challenge for us was to kind of, how do we find those individuals? I think we're very fortunate because individuals who get a buzz out of doing that and who want to learn quickly, and that's probably the most important single characteristic, is a desire to learn and to learn widely but fast. We were able to get hold of that. As that's evolved, the challenge has really been less about, I guess, the sort of day-to-day motivation of those individuals, but sort of making sure that we're broadly in agreement where we're headed in the longer term. And then, of course, because you're growing, so we're successfully growing. We're growing very, very quickly as a startup. That puts enormous pressures on you as a business because you are pretty constantly just behind the curve. You don't quite have enough development resource. You don't quite have enough sales or marketing or customer support resource. You don't quite have, you almost never have enough admin support. So there are all of these things that you're always slightly behind the curve on. So it's managing growth, and it's managing your organization to actually respond to that, and if you can, get ahead of that curve. Yeah. Of course, classic startups, if you go too fast, you hire too quickly, you get that speed wobble. So you get, the culture starts to dissemble somewhat, or it starts to slide away from where you wanted it to grow. Classically, the money starts to run low, and so the pressure just grows and grows. So you've got to kind of keep that needle, where you've got to get yourself in a very, very tight range of investing enough, not investing too much, both people-wise and, of course, business-wise.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and then the as you said, you get that problem where those people that are used to having so much to do, as you get bigger, you have to start specializing in roles and functions, and they lose some of that additional work that, even though they don't want to do it full time, they like having it as part of their their wheelhouse. So I mean, and you mentioned it there, which is, I think, is interesting. So I mean, have you had any initiatives, or have you implemented anything to support your people and culture through this growth stage? How have you managed it?
Yeah, so honestly, and I'd be, I'd love to hear from startups that have done it differently, but I think in terms of bandwidth to focus on, in almost in a formalized way on culture and people, is almost non-existent compared to, again, in a corporate where you dedicate formal time to it. We have dedicated not a great deal, so quite a limited amount of time formally to it, but we are regularly conscious of the culture that we're creating, and we talk about it a lot, and it really comes through in almost in the activity. So it's kind of, we are tinkering with the culture as we're operating, which I think is, frankly, just is like both the reality of it, but also a little bit more authentic, because you can set out to want to be something, but the reality is you're going to be, if you're going to authentically be the organization, it's going to come from the nature of the individuals inside it. So one of the things that I think is really key to do is as those all-rounders grow and as they learn and develop, people inevitably start to do and will always do the part of the job that they love the most first. So it's starting to just gently support them in moving in that direction, and as long as you can keep that within a controlled element, so they don't stop doing things that are critical, then actually they start to get more and more out of it, and their learning starts to develop in a direction. So I can foresee us over the course of the next few years having key individuals in certain roles, and then having really grown into those roles and understanding therefore where the gaps are in terms of both what we need culturally and what we need in terms of the business. And those two things, if you're getting it right, sort of overlap quite nicely.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. Being honest about your culture is is being honest about your culture rather than having a set of strap lines, on a wall that are, at best aspirational. So, I think if you're starting there with that honesty and saying, it's good, it's bad, it's indifferent, there's good times, there's bad times, that, that's the great, and it will adapt over time, right? It's the nature of the
Yeah.
beast, especially in a startup. It will, I read the book on Everything Breaks at 25, where culture changes and everything breaks around there, and then you have to readapt, and it's true. So I mean, in terms of that, there, coming from that corporate background and your experiences, and I don't want to necessarily pigeonhole you too much with your corporate background, but everyone is a product of their environment to a certain extent. Have you changed or had to adapt the way that you lead into a startup? Is that something, or have you started to lead the way you've always wanted to lead?
Coming from my human rights background, I think my leadership style has always been very democratic in ethos, very flat. I struggle to believe that strong hierarchy is of meaningful value in most situations.
Mm-hmm.
As I say, if you read a lot of military history, even in the most intense situations, people have this frankly uninformed assumption that you need a lot of hierarchy, you need somebody who's always in command and control. But in fact, when you look at it, human beings actually, the more you give them clarity of purpose and the ability to master, I lean on Daniel, I think it's Daniel Pink.
Daniel Pink, yeah.
When he talks about motivation being driven by purpose, mastery, and autonomy, and I think that's really, really important. I don't think that really changes, and I certainly haven't changed in my belief in that and driving that out. I think you just do it in a somewhat different way when you're in a startup to the way you might do it in a corporate. Again, in a corporate, there is lots of support for that, and I've had the fortune to hire for the right attitude as opposed to skill set, and then really focus on building teams that operate to devolving power, devolving responsibility, building autonomy, and ensuring people master things. I think that probably that bit I found the most. One of the things I've really found rewarding in a startup is because you can see that happen so much more quickly. So you can take somebody on and very quickly watch them, and you're coaching somebody into mastering something, because the faster they can do it autonomously, the more effective you're going to be. As I say, we're all rounders. We all have to do a bit of everything at some point. Every one of us has to pick up the phone to a customer, or be able to describe the offering, or to dive into the platform and pull some data out, or whatever the case may be. So you're really, really trying to focus really hard on building autonomy, and then and giving them autonomy as soon as you can see them start to sort of master what they're working on, and then just coming back to that focus, not with a great deal of frequency, as I say, or certainly not formally, but like often talking about, where are we headed? What are we trying to do? And we started to talk about our values for the first time recently. So what is it that we value as a business, and what is it that we genuinely value versus what we'd like to value, and therefore what we might need to do to address some of those. We work in the legal tech sector is a very challenging sector, because we actually have a very, very in most ways, if you look at the legal sector as an industry, it's a very successful industry. It's growing, and it's been growing. It's got some of the smartest individuals working in it, doing very high quality of work. It's internationally recognized, but it has a very low tolerance for error. Now, startups are by their nature going to make mistakes. It's what you do when you're building at 100 miles an hour when you're doing that. So you've got to balance the need to make error with the ability to sort of fix those quickly, with building the relationships with your clients so that when something goes wrong, they understand. Which is something that is, once you're big and established, there's far less tolerance for. So that's really what I've been focused on, in building, trust-rich relationships, where people, fundamentally trust what we're doing, and trust in the mission of what we're doing. And our individuals internally have that sense of it as well. And that's supported by our board and our investors.
I think that's fantastic. I think, to be able to create that environment, where people can adapt those three things of autonomy, mastery, purpose, gain the ability to learn, develop, make mistakes, obviously not too many, but have that freedom to do that, but in the right environment, I think is fantastic and very, very unique. Everyone talks about it, everyone wants to do it, but having the ability to do it often is like turning a big tanker. It's too far down the road to do that.
Yeah, and I mean, and I'm acutely aware in various contexts of the need. A culture that's in the wrong place is very difficult to get right. So wanting to not, make too many mistakes, and you do. I mean, I make, errors with that, regularly, and there are always pressure points. You have a demand to grow a business which might clash with what you want to do with an individual, or how they want to grow, or where differences of where we see the business going. So sometimes you've got to, sometimes I get that wrong. I do, and the thing I really focused on, and again, I think it's a key thing, is to remove as much as possible any fear from the equation. When you introduce fear into an organization, you create disinformation. I mean, we've just seen with the US presidents what can happen with disinformation. But if somebody's reporting to you and they start working in your business and they make a mistake, the very last thing you ever want them to do is to be afraid of telling you that. So the moment you create fear, whether it's fear of losing your job, fear of embarrassment, or a fear that they're failing at it and that they're not, developing and growing you just want to combat that as quickly as you can. So, we make plenty of mistakes. There is absolutely no value in rage or bollocking or any of those things. Because simply, as soon as you introduce fear, we are going to make more mistakes. There will be more errors. We will, there'll be bugs in the development. We'll forget to phone somebody back. There'll be a typo in a document. If you create an environment of fear, you just make it less likely that individual is going to tell you what you need to hear. And when you're trying to grow a business and when you're trying to build an organization, the very last thing you need is to have a situation where somebody's afraid to tell you what they need to tell you. You need to know, you need to understand. So the sort of maintaining the eradication of fear is really important. And the other side of that, the cool side of that, of course, is making it fun or exciting or challenging. So fun maybe is a stretch at times, but it's the great thing about a startup is I'm never bored. I don't think anyone in our organization is ever bored. I might wake up on a Monday morning and think, oh, geez, another whole week. And in a blink of an eye, it's Friday. If we're running at 100 miles an hour, and that's really, really exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think, just to cap off the fear aspect, I think, and we've seen this before with other people where they've been afraid to let people know something's done wrong. It's eaten away at them. They've left the organization, and the organization hasn't found out that the error until after they've gone. And from a business owner's perspective, from myself included, is that I would much rather know now, sort it out, however bad it is, than find out, and further down the line, and that causes massive issues either with the clients or whatever. So.
I mean, sorry to interrupt you, but the great counterpoint to that, of course, is accountability. So when we make mistakes, everyone in our organization, I mean, if I showed you our Slack channel, you'd see it. Somebody goes, "Hey guys, I've done a boo-boo here. This is it's on me. I'll own, communicating with the client or fixing it or doing whatever." I think if you remove fear, you have to have accountability. You can't you can't have no fear but no accountability. You have to have that, and we definitely have that. There is clear ownership. We all admit when we make mistakes. Equally, when we do something really well and we get that feedback from the client and we see success. So I got a call from a client just the other day to say that using our platform, they'd won a new piece of business, which just immediately was a huge return on investment and confidence in what we were doing. And the buzz we got as a business from that was just so fantastic. So there is a reward to that. I do have a little hobby horse, which from a people perspective, and this is largely me, and I suppose at some point I may be pressured into it, but I'll resist for as long as possible. Is we do not do formal appraisals. I think we do lean on data science in our business, and I think there's sufficient data science as well as behavioral science to show that formal appraisals as a process are entirely counterproductive. The only individual that gets anything out of that is the HR director. I think for the rest of the organization, they are poor distractions, poor forms of coaching and evaluation and support. I don't think they do any good at all, and I think they do the opposite of motivate. I think they demotivate. There's really good research that shows when they do brain scans of individuals in a formal appraisal situation that their brain goes into fight or flight mode, and in fight or flight mode you have absolutely no capacity to learn. So the thesis that an appraisal is a feedback and reflection and a learning opportunity for the manager and the employee doesn't happen. So why do you do it? Dump it. It's a complete and utter waste of time. The crazy notions of bell curves and how you should conform to it, the disastrous fights you get into with this department was generous and those guys were too mean or whatever. It's like, oh, honestly, what a waste of time. We don't do that.
How do you overcome that?
Well, you just don't need it. You just, you focus on, valuable, rich conversations with individuals. And I confess, actually, I need to do that more often. And those aren't formal conversations. Those are like, how are you feeling? Where do you think we're headed? How does that feel? Where do you think you want to learn more? How do you want to grow? And people engage with those. We just,
fascinating.
Appraisals, dump them, get rid of them.
Yeah,
I think some of the smartest organizations just don't do appraisals like that anymore at all.
Yeah, no,
that's my hobby. I'll jump off.
No, it's fine, and it's a topic in itself, and the conversation, the one-to-one aspect, which is more driven by the team member than the manager. Then these make much more productive sessions. It's all about like you say, where are you going? What is it? Where do you feel that you're not strong enough? Where do you need more support, etc. It's a much better conversation, and I don't think you've been good at this for the last 12 months or whatever. So
I hope. Sorry, carry on.
No, go ahead. So the last 12 months then, so what, what's that been like in the startup world, well, in your particular world, has it been time for pause, panic, or progression? How have you been using this time? Have you been, has it been lots and lots of new business? Has it been, have you been focusing on product updates, a bit of everything?
So I think in some respects, we've been pretty lucky. So the legal sector overall, a large amount of legal spend is distress purchase. I think in the early days of lockdown, that there was generally a brake put on that. I think in the main, that's the foot's come off the brake pedal there. We fundamentally focus on disputes and litigation. Disputes and litigation unfortunately arise in times of stress in an economy and in a society. You just have to look at the disputes between business owners who took out insurance policies to cover themselves for things like a pandemic, or being forced to shut down for a period, and the battle they've had with insurers on that one, to see that there's a lot of that going on, and that generates very rich data, and we have a market of law firms who find that data extremely valuable in terms of using it to help them win new business, win new instruction, but also to start to inform the decisions they're making in that, to look at past history, to look at the data and analytics we have in past decisions, and to use that to inform the strategies and the way they might advise and guide their clients. So for us, we've been quite fortunate that that's been the case. I think the wider economy, of course, concerns us, and if it were not for the pandemic, I think we would have grown considerably more quickly. But we have continued to grow. In fact, we're growing quite productively. We've been very focused on supporting our customers and really understanding the nature of the challenge that they faced over the course of the last year, and trying to introduce as much as we can in terms of functionality, but also data to assist them to navigate that. So that's really been our focus. I think one of the things that it has done is it's made some of the value propositions within our offering more acute than others, and again, that goes back to us, just being really good at listening, and that's the whole team, not just the ones who spend most of the time in front of clients, but the ones who actually look at the data, look at the way in which the data is being used, really thinking carefully about what users need and helping them. So, for instance, probably, pre-lockdown, it wasn't the case that actually some of our data is being used primarily for clients, for our customers to win new instruction and to engage and better service their clients. It was used much more as a research tool, and as the general economic challenge came along, so that requirement, that demand rose, and we focused a lot harder on meeting that demand. So just being really sensitive to them has been very, very helpful to us, and it's allowed us to continue to grow. It's as I say, I don't think we've grown as quickly as we would have if there wasn't a pandemic. Pretty much most businesses will say that. We're fortunate, of course, as a startup. Where you are fortunate is you have agility. So all our systems are in the cloud, which gives us, we can swiftly move to remote working. We were already remote working to a degree anyway. I think as I say, we run a very flat structure, so individuals have been able to get on pretty quickly. So that's been really important. I think one of the things that I think will be a challenge that will grow for us in the future is classically one of the attractions of working in a startup is the flexibility that you would get. So this isn't a real office behind me, but our offices don't look too different to this. We're in a classic WeWork environment, but you get that flexibility. It's a little bit cool. You get nice decent coffee. WeWork's famous for their beers on a Friday afternoon. Or ping pong tables. Frankly, we never had time for ping pong, but that flexibility, that work from home, work different hours, and so on. One of the things the pandemic's done is it's introduced that. So in a corporate environment, we would get requests for, I'd like to work from home, and the general or flexible work. And the general thing was you have to demonstrate that is viable. I think COVID's proved that flexible working is viable. That job sharing is viable, that remote working is viable. All of those things have been, overtly demonstrated. I mean, I see lots of our customers talking about never returning fully to the office again, having a much more of a flexible environment where they still have an office, but people can really choose where they want to work. And so it's going to become that much harder for us to attract individuals, because actually they're no longer stuck in a corporate that's that inflexible. We've got to we've got to think of other things that are going to make it attractive to come into a startup, because certainly salary is not is not the attractant and that big package of benefits that you get in a classic business. Much harder when it comes to a corporate.
I think I think you're right there. I think that that is one of the benefits that startups used to do, because they were already, startups tend to pick up the latest trends and what the workforce wants, and they draw down on that quite quickly. It's one of the benefits of doing that. I think yes, the remote working has allowed big organizations to do that more freely. I still think that the larger corporates will still want some sort of face time in organizations, and as do startups. But I think the boundaries have pushed out before now. So I think what happened before, we used to have a sort of a macro war on talent, if you like, within your area, whereas now it's truly a global war on talent, because every organization now has no boundaries to recruit the best people. So it will be interesting to see how that develops. And but I think what you said earlier around that sort of knowledge-based work, that I think that will never change. And I think that's one thing that you have over any large corporate, and most startups have over large corporates, is having that freedom to get involved in lots of different aspects of the business, and be able to learn more and new skills. That's one thing that people look for the most, above and beyond salary and and a long list of benefits that hardly get used.
Yeah, and and not make, I hope I haven't made it sound like it's not exciting, because I think excitement, that intensity of purpose is much stronger. That feeling that you're doing something different, new, meaningful.
Yeah.
It's very tangible, and much more tangible, and I think that certainly does it. And also to say, uh, I think one of the things we've lost through the pandemic is, of course, it's much harder to engage through, as we're having to do now, through Zoom, than it is person to person, and that is a key part of an effective organization, is those opportunities to do that, to feel like you're a team. So I think that will inevitably come back the moment we're allowed to congregate and actually work in the same room. But I think generally that sense of being able to sort of be more flexible about it, I think that's here to stay.
Yeah. So, clearly, you've adopted some great working practices, and I love the idea of you recruiting based on mentality and approach, and and willingness to learn. I think that's fantastic. Diversity and inclusion, this has reached new prominence, for lots of obvious reasons and positivity. So, what successes have Solomonic had in this area? Is that something that clearly your background will contribute to this? But what's working well for you?
Yeah, so this is I'll concede is a challenge. My vertical competencies are primarily in marketing and business development and related strategy, and it's been, I've always had a diversity inclusivity mindset, and actually as a marketing director, it was relatively easy to build that, to hire, to widen the mindsets and really build the diversity and the inclusiveness of the team. In a small startup, that numerically it's difficult, because there are a handful of you. We found it quite difficult, and particularly difficult when it comes to things like development resource. There are just significantly fewer women who are developers, and unfortunately, because they're in high demand as a consequence of that, it's that much more difficult for us to attract them to come and work for us. So that is a challenge. That's one we're going to overcome, but that is quite a difficult one. That aside, I think it's about having it as a mindset and making sure that it's something that you consciously are aware of all the time. One of the things I noticed, for example, is that we're quite regularly asked to speak on panels, and we now work very hard to. It's usually far more useful to have one of my customers on a panel than it is to have me on a panel. It's like to get somebody to actually talk about utilization of our product and how it's helped them. It's much more useful to have me speak about it. So we work quite hard to make sure that we engage with the richness of who our customers are to support that. But internally, we're a team of, at the moment, of 5 people, and unfortunately, we with 4 men and 1 woman, and like that will evolve over time. It's just very, very difficult when you have such small numbers, and primarily you're only hiring right now in the in terms of development to do much about that aggressively at the moment. But we are massively aware of it.
I think you're right. It's the mindset. It starts with that. If it's not there, I think a lot of organisations are chastised for not having enough diversity and inclusion. But in certain organisations, if the talent's just not there, it's just not there. And there's it's in a startup environment, you need people who can do the job. Like you say, you've got to be there ready to go from day 2. And when you've got that, when you can start to look further afield, you can start to look at development and bringing on people with lesser skills, or not quite and starting to develop those individuals. So I think you're absolutely right. It starts with a mindset, and if anyone has that mindset, it's gonna be you for sure. So so just some quick fire questions then to finish off. There's been some really fantastic stuff in there, and I tend to ask these questions at the end to everybody. So we're talking out the question we just asked there. So and you've given some insight to this already in as part of our conversation. But what does leadership mean to you? What can someone looking at this or listening to this, again from you and saying, do you know what, I want to go and work for Solomonic? What does leadership mean to you?
So I think there's a great long quote by Roosevelt about the greatness is to those who were in the arena and fighting, and even if you fought and lost, at least you fought. And to me, leadership is about that's standing up and getting in there, and not be too timid to do that. I suppose leading from the front to some degree, but also leading in service of those you work with. That it is your role to help them succeed, as opposed to for you to succeed. And if you do that, if you get them to succeed, you will succeed. You will succeed as an organization. That to me, I think is key.
Yeah, I like that. And what piece of advice would you give your peers navigating this period?
Jeez. Nothing, fundamentally right now, nothing is more important at the end of the day than family and health. At the end of, ultimately right now, I think we're in a tough place economically. We're in a tough place as a society. We're having the wrong kind of conversations about the value of life. I think where you're in a conversation where you say somebody's life is worth less because they're nearer the end of it, or because they've got health or condition or something, you're just starting to undervalue life. And when you start to undervalue life in one place, I grew up in a awfully divided society. Like you start to devalue all life. I think that's really tough. So I would say nothing's more important right now than health and family. Focus on that before anything else, because if there's anything you're going to regret, it's that you did the opposite. That aside, what's a great other saying? Sometimes courage is just saying, "I'll try again tomorrow." Rome wasn't built in a day. Just keep using bad metaphors. Just keep at it. You'll have tough days. In a startup, you have tough days. You have great days. Just get up again and try again tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot to be taken from that, and easier said than done. But I think it's worth saying, again and again. So, and then finally, pandemic to Brexit. What opportunities or challenges do you see in the sector in the next sort of 12 to 18 months?
So the sector overall is really interesting. I mean, when it comes to disputes, the UK is seen, London is seen as an international centre. It's a preeminent centre for good reason. The quality of the law that we have, the quality of the individuals, and the organisations that are involved in it are of the highest standard. Brexit presents a challenge because there are already courts starting up in the EU English-speaking courts. There is a challenge to the sort of the preeminence of London as a legal centre. I think that challenge will continue, but I think we're very well placed as a sector overall to meet that. What we've been doing some data crunching. It's been amazing how, and I know parts of the justice system have really battled over the last year, but the sort of civil disputes courts have actually done an amazing job of staying on top of cases, staying on top of actions, using remote hearings and all the rest of it to actually get work done and to move things along. So I think that's going to continue to be a challenge. I think it's going to be overcome. We want to play our part in making sure that our data and analytics tells an accurate story of just how effective London is as a place for the resolution of disputes. And we'll continue to do that. That aside, in the world of prediction, I think there are a lot of unknowns at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Edward, that's been fantastic. As always, I enjoy talking to you, and we could go on for hours. I know that because you have a lot of opinions on these areas, and it's fantastic. And hopefully, if you're listening to this, that you can get a good sense of what Solomonic stand for and Edward's leadership style. They are a growing organisation, and so please reach out to him and see what opportunities exist in his pipeline over the next 12 months. This will be going out probably around in the next probably 3 or 4 weeks. So there's who knows what the future holds for you guys. So whatever happens, I do wish you the very best of luck for 2021, Edward. And
thank you, and you too.
And look forward to speaking to you again soon.
So, thank you.